Big political developments ahead of next year's election. A two-day conference underway to bring together opposition parties with a view to winning next year's election. Some surveys indicate the ANC may fall below a 50% majority. If that happens, coalitions, of course, will be required for effective governance. The DA recently launched its Moonshot Pact, and this conference is the next step on the road to creating a cohesive opposition. The pact has been renamed the Multi-Party Charter for South Africa. Let's talk about this and the changing shape of politics in South Africa with political analyst Dr Moeletsi Mbeki. Dr Mbeki, thank you so much for joining us. We know that there's actually a media briefing underway at the moment. We're going to cross in a little bit later and have a listen to what's being said. Of course, it's day one of two, so there's lots that's still to come. But do you think that this is a good idea?
Well, I think it is a good idea. It's a good idea to have, we have, in my view, too many political parties in South Africa, and many of them actually believe in the same thing and have the same message. They have the same programs, they have the same agendas, and they're divided by personalities, personality cults. And this is confusing the electorate without adding any value. So if these parties which have similar programs and similar agendas come together and form a coalition, or better still, form one party, then our democracy becomes more mature than having a multiplicity of little parties. And then one big party, which is the ANC. So it's a good thing for opposition parties to get together to try and reduce the fragmentation in our political system.
You know, the DA, it was their initial idea, this Moonshot Pact. I have to say I'm glad they've changed the name. It just didn't work for me, but that's just my opinion. So it's the Multi-Party Charter. But the reality is, okay, they've got, it's the DA, Action South Africa, Freedom Front Plus, IFP, and a few smaller parties. But they don't have the third most powerful party in the country on board. Do you think that's a real problem?
Well, it is a real problem. When it was announced, the Moonshot Pact, when the leader of the DA announced it, John Steenhuisen, he said, the pacts, the DA's enemy number one is the economic freedom fighters, another opposition party. So to me, that puzzled me, is how do you have another opposition party, the number 3 opposition party, as your enemy number one? If he said the DA's enemy number one is the ruling party, the ANC, well, I would understand, but actually in a democracy there are no enemies. You see, this is one of the problems we are faced with. Our democracy is still at an early stage, is still immature. So leaders like John Steenhuisen don't understand that there are no enemies in a democracy. All political parties that are in parliament are constitutionally constituted parties. They are not enemies.
We're going to pause in our chat just for a little moment because Herman Mashaba, who of course is head of Action South Africa, who actually has been quite friendly with the EFF in past times. Let's listen to what he's saying after day one and then we'll chat again.
Convey my greatest gratitude to all of you because 1994 when I went out to vote, I went to vote for a new dispensation, brighter future for my kids and my grandchildren. Unfortunately, that dream 29 years later, it almost disappeared. And I'm so glad that this afternoon we've managed to rekindle that dream again. What we achieved today, without any doubt, historic. Something that in the morning I was saying to myself, are we all going to be able to really reach consensus? Was it easy? What's easy in life? Fortunate enough, I was born and raised in an environment that's tough. That's why I'm a tough human being, because I accept life to be what it is. And us as human beings, God has given us these little brains to use to navigate those challenges. Members of the media, thank you so much for really being made to wait. and really being with us to inform people of South Africa about the new dispensation, about the new future that we are creating for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you, everyone. Fellow South Africans, we are going to start a new chapter come 2024. I'm confident about that. Give us a chance. We still have tomorrow to finish our agenda, but I'm positive. What we're going through today, I cannot see us failing to achieve even further heights tomorrow. Thank you very much and good night.
All right, so we might pop in again, but just catching the tail end of what Herman Mashaba, he spoke about rekindling the dream, that this was an historic moment and a new chapter. So it sounds like it's been a good day one. And I have to say, seeing a leader like Herman Mashaba, who really with his Action SA party has made quite a lot of waves, has garnered quite a lot of attention. Do you think that's a sort of leadership that we need to be hearing more of?
Well, as you know, Herman Mashaba is a breakaway party from the Democratic Alliance. So it's good to see that the two of them are talking to each other and are sitting on the same table. So who knows, they might get back together again.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, I think really this is a positive development. It's positive because we need consolidation in our politics.
Yeah.
We need parties that have gravitas, that have strengths in terms of that are more or less equal, so that there's real competition in our politics.
I'm going to interrupt you once more, because now we're going to hear from Peter Groenewald of the Freedom Front Plus, and then we'll chat again.
Taking a whole day, but it is not only a whole day. You must understand that these negotiations are actually coming over the last 3 months as well. Because I said it is an initiative of all the political parties. It is not easy, but I can say tonight that I am pleased that rational thinking of what is in the best interest of South Africa, its people, and our future, we have achieved that, and we are appealing to the electorate of South Africa, make our hands stronger so that we can create a better future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Groenewald, leader of the Freedom Front Plus. I now call on Mr. V.F. Schlabisa, president of the eNCA Freedom Party.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I firstly want to thank the media for being patient with us. Again, this afternoon, I want to greet the people of South Africa. In the morning, we set the tone that as we engage in the National Convention, we will ensure that we put the people of South Africa first. It is a great pleasure on behalf of the IFP to thank the media for allowing us to show accountability and transparency to the people of South Africa. What we are doing now is to confirm that the deliberations that we have been engaged in during this day have not only about us as political leaders, but about the people of South Africa. We have made a great progress in terms of giving a name which has been read by our independent facilitator, Professor William Gumede. We also agreed on the principles and values, the shared governing principles, as well as a vision of the country we all dream, which is a better country than what we have currently. We also committed ourselves to work and ensure that we definitely achieve the 50% plus one by mobilizing the 14 million people who are dormant and 13 million people who are unregistered, so that the 27 million ensure that we remove the government that has failed our people. I want to thank all the leaders with whom we have been involved today, because we have ensured that coalition is about compromise and finding the common grounds in the interest of people. We are confident that going forward, we will revive hope, progress, and prosperity to the people of South Africa, and we commit to do the best we can to make their dreams that has been destroyed to be reawakened and build South Africa that we'll all be proud of. Thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much to Mr. Schlabisa, President of the IFP. And then the next speaker is Mr. John Steenhuisen, Federal Leader of the Democratic Alliance.
Thank you very much, and good evening to the fellow leaders and the members of the media and those watching at home. When I opened my remarks this morning, I said very clearly that while there'd be politicians sitting around the table, this was actually about the people of South Africa. And I think that any South African sitting at home worried about the future, worried about their children, worried about whether they can find work, worried about the high rate of crime in the country, worried about the fact that the lights are off in large parts of South Africa as we speak, that help is on the way. Because what we've done today is to lay the foundations of a new majority in South Africa that is going to sweep the ANC out of power and usher in a new government that puts people ahead of politicians. The robust engagements that we've had today have been robust, but certainly sincere. And it has been great to be able to share a negotiating table with the teams from the other parties. But also I want to pay a special thank you to Professor Gumede, who I'm sure his experience of most politicians is them fighting like a bunch of cats in a sack. But he took the courage to put his hand into the sack today, and I think he's been himself surprised with what has come out of it. So thank you very much, Prof. Gumede and your team. Obviously, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think that the step that we've taken today, together, determinedly, and with vigour, represented in this alternative programme, which will continue to be fleshed out as we continue, just as it has been worked on for the last 11 weeks, is a beacon of hope for all South Africans, that help is on the way, change can happen, and that tomorrow can be better than today. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Steenhuisen, Federal Leader of the Democratic Alliance. Okay. I have consulted Professor Gumede as the independent chairperson, and he will take 2 questions on behalf of everyone. So hands up. Not the people who spoke this morning. Okay. This gentleman, 1, 2. Okay.
So while they have questions, let's chat a little bit more, Mr. Mbeki, and apologies for promoting you to doctor, my error. But it's interesting what the IFP leader, Nkosini Schlabisa, said, that we need to get the dormant voters voting. Because I think a lot of South Africans are just tired of politics when they see the mess at local government level with coalitions, backbiting, betrayal, lack of service delivery. There's a jaundiced view of politicians. Do you think that it's important that John Steenhuisen and the DA does not lead this? Because there's been a lot of talk about leadership. There's a lot of big personalities in that room. Do you think it's important that the official opposition is not the leader here?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. Obviously, the DA is the convener of this conference. Yeah. So they are leading it already. So we can pretend that they are not. But they are the ones who announced the Moonshot Pact, that this is the pact that they are creating, and that they are going to convene a conference, a national convention. that they are going to exclude the economic freedom fighters, and so on. So they are the leaders of the gathering that we're seeing today. Now, we can pretend that they are not the leaders for whatever reason, but they are the de facto leaders of the gather of this conference that is happening in Kempton Park today.
And I think the other interesting issue is around whether the DA would work with the ANC. I heard a sound clip from earlier today where, and I think John Steenhuisen's probably going to be asked it again now by one of the journalists, and we'll go back for that. But he was asked, will you commit to the DA absolutely excluding the possibility of working with the ANC? Because a lot of people say, well, some people say, makes sense that if there's coalitions required, put the DA and the ANC together. They both have, the two parties, the best experience at governance. Do you think the DA has been emphatic enough? Because what John Steenhuisen said was, we're not in any discussions, but that doesn't mean it will never happen, does it?
Well, Helen Zille, when she was the leader of the official leader, I know she's the leader now, but I'm not quite sure who is leader, who is not leader in the DA. Anyway, she made it very clear that as long as Cyril Ramaphosa is president of the ANC, the DA is willing to enter into a coalition with the ANC. So I presume that is still the policy of the DA. I haven't seen any renunciation of that policy.
Yeah.
So the one renunciation that has been made explicit by John Steenhuisen is that the DA will never work with the EFF. So they haven't said they won't work with the ANC. They said they won't work with the EFF. So I take it a grand coalition, if you wish, between the DA and the ANC is still on the card.
And I think that it's the EFF that's been emphatic that they won't work with the ANC, am I right?
Well, the EFF actually has said
I mean, the ASA, Action South Africa, said they won't work with the ANC.
With the ANC.
That's right.
Yes,
so there's a problem, potentially. Yeah.
There is a problem amongst them, but my own view about the coalition is we need political competition in our political system. For democracy to really work, there has to be 2 or 3 parties of similar strength, similar experience, but with different solutions to the country's problems. So then the voters have a choice of policies with realistic parties. We don't have political competition in South Africa today. If you look at the last general election, the ANC was 57% of the vote. The next party, which was the DA, was way down at about 22% of the vote. And then the third party, which was the EFF, was even further down at 10%. So that's why we have so much corruption in our political system. It's because there's no competition in our political system.
Do you think it's going to change next year? Because what we've seen at local level is even the smallest parties can have the biggest impact. Do you think that we're going to start seeing that within our provinces, even at national level? Do you believe
No,
it?
I don't. You said our political parties don't want competition because competition will stop them from being corrupt. So big parties and small parties, they don't want political competition. That's why you get these big coalitions like you have in the Johannesburg municipality. This big coalition led by a party with one member, with one councillor, because they don't want competition, because competition first will demand that they have real solution for the people and that there is no corruption, and that if a party is corrupt, it can be voted out by a similarly big party that can bring alternative policies. This is the problem we're having in South Africa today, and this is what we're having in the municipalities, is that the municipalities are working very hard to avoid political competition, and that's why there is paralysis at the municipality level and there's corruption. at the municipality level.
So would your ideal, and you alluded to it earlier, that better than a multi-party charter would be all these parties saying, hang on, let's just be in one party together. Would it be ideal to have a situation like we have in the UK where ultimately, yes, there are other parties, but ultimately it comes down to, is it Labour or is it Conservative? Is that the best way to keep those parties in check?
Yes, it is the best way. If we take a practical example of what happened in the United States over COVID, we had a Republican Party government led by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump said, COVID is just a small cold. And hundreds of thousands of people were dying in the United States, and he wouldn't take any action. The Democratic Party came and said, no, this is not a small cold. This is a serious epidemic. It must be priority number one for the American government. And the American people chose, that was a real choice. They chose the party that said COVID-19 should be priority number one for the government of the United States. And sure enough, they voted for the Democratic Party. And the United States got on top of the problem of COVID. If there was no competition to the Republican Party and to Donald Trump, there would have been millions and millions of American citizens dying because Donald Trump says this is a minor. So we do need equal parties that are equivalent, 2 or 3 parties that are similar size, which have different policies. And that's what you're having in the UK. That's what you're having. That's what you're having in the United States.
Are we there yet?
No, we're not there yet. This is an experiment. Let us hope the experiment that happened today at Kempton Park is a way towards giving us a party that is strong enough to compete against the ANC. A multiplicity of little parties forming coalitions is not competition against the ANC, which is why the ANC ignores them and carries on with its own programs or non-programs, as the case may be.
So important steps made today. Let's see where it takes us. We certainly need fresh direction and we need to get things moving in this country. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. Such a great pleasure to speak to you. Political analyst there, Moeletsi Mbeki. Do stay with us.